Hello modern quilters, I'm here to teach you a little bit about vintage quilt revival. We're going to be making a block out of this book using paper piecing and template piecing. The block that we're working on is Dakota Star. There is a featured quilt that combines the Dakota Star block with another block. The directions for this block are on page 27, and this is the block that we'll be assembling. So here is the block when it is finished. The triangles here are paper pieced, and the yellow wedges are done with a template. I'll flip it over and you'll see that these triangles here are all paper pieced. They still have the paper on them, and then these are the wedges that were done with the template. First we'll start with a little bit of paper piecing. So we used some foundation paper. This paper is made from Carol Doick. It's a great paper that you can run through your printer. You can print multiple copies. The ink does not spread onto your fabric. It's very lightweight, and your fabric sticks to it nicely without being too slippery. So that is the paper that we're using. We're going to run that through our printer and print the paper pieced pattern, which is the Dakota Star foundation piecing template. This template then has 3 pieces on it. Your pieces will get lined out so that your colorful or your dark fabric is here, your background fabric is here and here. If you want to make multiple copies without running through your printer, you run one through your printer and then you stack multiple copies, and then you sew with your sewing machine with the thread taken out of the machine, so your needle penetrates little tiny holes into your pattern, so then you have your pattern transferred onto the paper and you can do multiple copies. The other nice thing is you can see your pattern on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and just show you step by step laying out your fabric. So here is a paper pieced pattern. Here is the diamond in the center, and we will lay our fabric right side up so that it covers that entire diamond area. You want to make sure you have good margin the whole way around. Our first seam will be right here. You can take your fabric, which is laying right side up, and press it with your finger a couple times, and you'll get a little crease in your fabric. That crease is where your seam will be. Your background fabric will lay over top of that at least 1/4 inch, and you will be sewing through that line. You want to at least flip it one time to make sure when you sew that it will cover the entire template and you see no template sticking out from underneath. So as long as you've auditioned it and made sure that you're covering the crease and you're covering the fabric, you're going to flip the fabric over by pinching it, or you can pin it. You'll flip it over and you'll sew on the paper side. So once you've sewn on the paper side, it will look like this. Okay, this is the back, and our fabric is on the underside. You will pull your paper away and trim it down using an add 1/4 ruler. The add 1/4 ruler gets butted up against the paper seam, and then you'll trim away any excess fabric. I'll show this step to you one more time. Then you'll flip it over and press your fabric out with a hot iron so that it lays nice and flat. Then you're going to take another background square, crease this on the seam line, lay your background square right side down, and it will flip over like this. So this has the background fabric laying right side down, and we've actually already sewn this line, and when it flips out it covers our template. So here you'll see that add 1/4 ruler trimming away the excess. So when I flip this over, you'll pull your paper back so that it's along that stitching line that you just did. This will be your excess fabric, and you'll butt your ruler right up against the edge of the paper, and there's your 1/4 inch seam. You'll flip it back over and then press. So after you press that, you want it to lay nice and flat with a hot iron. So I'll press this real quick. And then your seam line will be 1/4 inch within your outside line. So when you're looking at your template, This is your outside line and this is your seam line. When you punch your pattern, you want to make sure you're on that outside line, and that's what we'll trim to. So when I flip this over, the outside line is what's punched, and you want to carefully lay your ruler along the outside line and trim it. And you'll trim all the way around so that you end up with a beautiful triangle piece that is perfect to the point. There is your triangle. So that triangle will sit right here. You'll need to make 4 of those so that they complete that circle or that block. Next thing I'm going to show you is these wedges right here. So you are going to print another template. It will be printed on a full sheet of paper, but this is what it looks like. I have cut that out. It is called the Dakota Star Cutting Template. The other thing that you want to do is this fabric here is you want to starch it very heavily. So we recommend the Mary Ellen's Best Press Starch. It is a great starch, but you want to starch that up so that it's nice and stiff. That will support the bias edge. If you're cutting multiple layers, you can layer your fabric so that you have multiple layers. So this is a fat quarter, and I am just folding this fabric so that I have 4 layers. So there's 4 layers of fabric there. The other tip when you're cutting a template is you can spray it so that the back side of the template has a small sticky surface. So the spray that we're using is 505 spray, and when you spray it to the paper, it will make the template sticky. So I'm going to spray that real quick. And now that paper is sticky. What's nice to remember is that 505 spray, the sticky will stay on the paper and won't transfer to your fabric. So then you will lay your template and make sure all your margins are clear and you are actually cutting through all 4 layers or however many layers you're comfortable cutting. And you will want a ruler. You don't want to freehand cut this, and you'll lay your straight edge ruler right along the line and cut. When you cut 4 layers at once, your accuracy can improve because all of them were cut at the same time. You just want to take your time and make sure your edges are nice and straight and your ruler doesn't move. You don't want your template to get smaller as you work with it by trimming it away accidentally. So there I have cut my 4 layers, and my template is laying right on top, and it will peel away very easily. It can be used a couple of times. You may need to apply some spray. So there are my 4 templates that will go into my block. Again, those live right here, and then the paper piece one is right there. When you go to sew this, there are a couple of tips. So we are going to be sewing a yellow to a paper piece, and I leave the paper on to support that bias edge. We have starched this one pretty heavily. Since the paper is still on, you'll be able to see or mark your 1/4 inch line. So when you lay your ruler along this, you can mark a 1/4 inch line. This one's been sewn. This one has not been sewn. So I'll mark a 1/4 inch line so that you can see. And I'm going to do this with a pencil so that you guys can see that 1/4 inch. And I have a nice sharp pencil marking it all the way down. So there's where my seam is going to live. And my template piece is going to sew right sides together. So I'm going to sew these 2 pieces so that right sides are touching, and it will flip out like so. The most important tip I have for you is where that 1/4 inch is going to line up, you want it to be right in this little V position. If it's over, then your seam won't line up, and if it's under, when you flip this out, your edges will not be straight. So the tip I have is come in a 1/4 inch and line that up so that that 1/4 of an inch is right at the V point. And when you do that, this is the stitching line. Let me flip that so you can see when you flip that out, that line should be nice and straight. You will then sew a triangle to a wedge, a triangle to a wedge, and that's half the block. Then you'll do the other half, triangle to wedge, and then you'll sew 2 of them together so that it is in half. And I have pressed that seam open, so you'll see that there's 2 halves to that block. All your points should match. You should have a 1/4 inch reveal on each end. And that is your Dakota Star from Vintage Quilt Revival. And that is all your tips on paper piecing and template piecing. Thanks for joining us.